Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidi. The time is 9:57 Central African Time. And we're going to be switching gears now and look at what we've been observing for the past week. If you just joined us and you haven't been listening to the show since Monday, this week marks Aqsa Week 2026. And we've been observing it from the 11th right until the 17th of January. It's a global initiative aimed at deepening awareness, love, and responsibility for Masjid Al-Aqsa, Islam's third holiest site. And this year's focus spans generations, introducing children to the spiritual meaning of Al-Isra wal Miraj, while engaging adults on Al-Aqsa's religious, historical, and political significance, especially at a time when the compound faces sustained pressure and restrictions. Aqsa Week positions Al-Aqsa not only as a place of worship, but as a symbol of faith, a symbol of unity, and most importantly, a symbol of resistance. And to help us unpack why Al-Aqsa matters and why it remains under threat, we're joined by Ismail Patel, founder and chair of Friends of Al-Aqsa. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Ismail. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Salam Media.
Wa alaikum salam and assalamu alaikum to all your listeners as well.
No, I think we'll jump right into it. I think what's been very, very defining for me, especially with Al-Aqsa Week 2026, is the importance of Masjid Al-Aqsa, not only by name and not by its depth, but by its centrality to Islam. And I want you to expand a bit on that for our listeners. Why is Masjid Al-Aqsa so central to the Islamic faith, and what can be done to protect it?
You know, Al-Aqsa is connected to Muslim in every way you can think of. I mean, from the very basic history to great personalities, to the major prophets are connected to it, to Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's connection to it through Al-Isra wal Mi'raj. And beyond that is, of course, the most important. It is mentioned by name in the Holy Quran. So any which way you want to look at our culture, our heritage, our faith, our iman, all of them are connected to Masjid Al-Aqsa. And of course, each one of those branches, there's so many different ways we can speak about. But just, as a synopsis, that, it's so important for us to understand that if you are a Muslim, if you have faith, you love the prophets, you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it is incumbent upon you to love Masjid Al-Aqsa.
Most definitely. And one thing that has been very, very imperative is this year's theme of Al-Aqsa Week. The theme of 2026 is Al-Isra wal Miraj, and it features very, very strongly. What makes that moment so significant, especially for younger generations, while educating themselves about the significance of Al-Aqsa?
Well, you see, Al-Isra, first thing is Aqsa Week is in the middle of Al-Isra wal Mi'raj, which is on the 27th of Rajab. So for young people, they should understand that. But what they should also understand that Al-Isra wal Mi'raj is the journey taken by the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam from Mecca to Masjid Al-Aqsa. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taking him on that phenomenal and incredible journey in a period of a blink of an eyelid, right? And that is on its own, for us to accept that, is accepting the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it is Allah who's doing that. And that is strengthening our iman, because then we get to accept the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But also, it shows that Allah wanted to connect the Masjid of Al-Haram of Makkah with Masjid Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem. And that connection is significant, because Allah could have taken the Prophet directly from Makkah to him. He did not need to take him to Jerusalem first. And that connection brings so many different factors and so many lessons for us. For example, it connects Ruhul Quddus, who's Angel Jibreel, with Muqaddas, the name of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, with Baytul Maqdis, to bring him in the presence of Al-Quddus, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And those words means purity. So the purest of the angels, the purest of humanity, from a pure to the pure land of Al-Aqsa, to be in the presence of the purest of the pure, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that connection is phenomenal for us to understand that Al-Aqsa is part of the fabric of purity on earth for us as well to go and purify. So as a moment, of course, all of us are sinners, and it is sort of guiding us that, go there on those blessed land, the land that has been blessed by Allah, and therefore you can hopefully get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through that land. And of course, there's a second connection here as well, is that the first masjid ever built on planet Earth is the Haram of Makkah. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded his prophets to build Masjid Al-Aqsa 40 years later. So Al-Aqsa is the second masjid, or masjid built on Al-Aqsa was the second masjid built on earth. So there's that connection as well between the first and the second masjid. And of course, Al-Aqsa was the first Qibla. So by taking the Prophet on the night of Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj from Haram of Makkah to Masjid Al-Aqsa, brings all this to the fore, to the fore of the believer. It gets to understand how great and significant this place is, and we need to revive it. And of course, what it also does at the physical, material level around the world is when we, all of us, are concerned about Masjid Al-Aqsa, talk about Masjid Al-Aqsa, then we get that recipe that all of us are looking towards amongst Muslims, and that is a recipe of unity, because we're then united as an ummah for the cause of Al-Aqsa, and that brings us closer wherever the believer is, and it brings the ummah into one, if you like, plane and understanding. So I think Al-Aqsa Week is extremely important, and I would congratulate your channel as well for promoting it and talking about it, because that is greatly needed.
Most definitely. I want to touch on history and identity. Just swiftly move along to that. Al-Aqsa has been a place of continuous worship for centuries, as you mentioned. How does that uninterrupted history almost challenge modern day political narratives around the site and what it represents?
Okay, so what is very important here is, again, as Muslims, as I mentioned, at the moment, our identity, unfortunately, is mainly formed from the country we come from. So people ask you, who are you? You like to say I'm a South African, or I'm from England, or I'm Indian, or Pakistani. It's just natural. That's how we've been brought up. That's the atmosphere, if you like, we live in, living under. But when we start talking about Al-Aqsa, all of a sudden we realize that's our heritage, that's our history. This is where Prophet Adam al-Islam first placed, the second masjid was placed. And this is where our faith emerges through all those prophets. So all of a sudden we have a global identity, an identity that supersedes our, if you like, linguistic, our nationalistic, our cultural identity, to a more faith-based identity. And that identity, I think, is very important in this day and age for us to try and grasp and understand. So I hope Aqsa Week does that. But regarding the identity of Muslims in reference to Masjid Al-Aqsa, there's a second aspect which is very important. When we say Masjid Al-Aqsa was the first Qibla, what we're saying is throughout the period in Mecca, before the Prophet ﷺ did the Hijrah, Muslims used to face towards Masjid Al-Aqsa. What that meant is they had in their mental scape the idea that they are Muslims because they're facing Al-Aqsa and not the Haram in Mecca, which was right in front of them. And the Quraysh also differentiated themselves from the Muslims by facing the Kaaba. So Al-Aqsa became a symbol of identity. So to be a Muslim was to face Al-Aqsa. So that became your symbol, that becomes your identity. And that is how close the Sahabas were to Masjid Al-Aqsa, including the Prophet ﷺ for nearly 13 years in Mecca, right? And that is a period of time. Then after Hijrah, another 16 or 17 months. So Al-Aqsa was a Qibla for the Prophet for over 14 years, for greater part of his Nabuwah. And that love and identity they formed with Al-Aqsa frames their Muslimness. So that identity as well is important, and that is something we need to revive, and we need to understand all the other identities. Yes, we do have them, but they should be subservient to the greater identity of our faith.
Very, very important to note. I want to talk about the reality of the threats that Al-Aqsa is facing at this current moment. We so often speak about Al-Aqsa being under threat. What does that actually mean in practical terms? Is it about access? Is it about the overwhelming policing around Al-Aqsa or legal challenges? Or it goes even deeper? There's something a bit more sinister to or against the existence of Al-Aqsa and what it means.
Well, I'm afraid, unfortunately, it's a lot more sinister. It's all openly declared now. Majority of Israeli right-wing settlers are now calling for the demolition of the buildings on Masjid al-Aqsa, including ministers and including the Prime Minister. Just recently in 2025, on what's known as Jerusalem Day, he mentioned that the Temple Mount is ours, meaning Masjid al-Aqsa belongs to them. There are plans afoot to destroy the buildings on it. And of course, that is mirrored by the number of settlers who are now trespassing upon Masjid al-Aqsa. We estimate last year something like 52,000 settlers entered Masjid al-Aqsa, and that is a rise from 2003 of around 4,000. So from 4,000 to 52,000 settlers entering Masjid al-Aqsa. And of course, entering of the settlers is just not the numbers, because they come guarded with the occupying forces. They intimidate the Muslims. They stop the Muslims coming into the masjid at that time. They have also increased the number of hours they're entering the masjid. Initially, it was agreed they could come for 3 hours. Now that has been extended to 6 hours. It is also the way they're entering is changed. Initially, they just simply come and be like tourists. Now they're actually coming into the masjid compound and praying. And of course, all these escalations are very, very concerning to anybody. And therefore, that's the other reason I think we should also mention Aqsa Week should be celebrated, so people get to understand also the dangers facing to Masjid al-Aqsa, and hopefully make this week as a platform so that they can do their campaigning, lobbying, visiting Masjid al-Aqsa, so that we stop any nefarious plans of the Temple Mount movement.
And I want to expand on that, the resistance aspect of it, the protection of Al-Aqsa, and it not only being a responsibility of Palestinians, but being a concern for Muslims globally. In true lived, tangible terms, how do we go about that? How do we go about protecting Masjid Al-Aqsa and also resisting its extermination?
Valid point. Unfortunately, when we talk about the issue of Masjid al-Aqsa, we seem to pile it on the Palestinians, somehow that is a Palestinian issue. As we have mentioned throughout this interview, Al-Aqsa is important to the Muslim world, to every Mu'min, every believer, and therefore it is incumbent upon everybody to try and protect Masjid al-Aqsa and to build that love for Masjid al-Aqsa. As to the practicality, I think I'll repeat and say that the first thing we should do is try and visit Masjid al-Aqsa, because that gives solidarity to the Palestinians. It also sends a signal to the occupying forces that there are people around the world who are concerned about this. But more than that is spread the love of Masjid al-Aqsa to your neighbors, to your friends, to your colleagues, to your family, in particularly to the policymakers in your country, wherever you are and wherever you're listening from. Make sure that the policymakers understand and raise this at the highest level, so that it is talked about and the dangers are highlighted. We should also boycott anything to do with Israel. And this is, again, directly linked with our faith, I think, where they were trying to do this because we're protecting Masjid al-Aqsa. And continue with all these efforts and build that love. I think if we start building the love of Al-Aqsa, many things will follow, and we'll hopefully create a great narrative over Masjid al-Aqsa and counter this Temple Mount movement initiative that trying to destroy the buildings upon Masjid al-Aqsa.
Lastly, and in closing, what is that one message you want listeners to carry with them about Al-Aqsa beyond Aqsa Week, especially because we're coming to the end of it? This is the latter parts of Aqsa Week is coming to an end on the 17th of January. One message you want listeners that are listening, not just in South Africa, but the world over, to carry with them about Al-Aqsa beyond just Aqsa Week?
Don't stop talking about Masjid al-Aqsa. Build the love of Aqsa in Aqsa Week and continue that throughout your life.
There you have it. Founder and chair of Friends of Al-Aqsa, Mr. Ismail Adam Patel. Jazakallah so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate your time, and thank you for that very, very insightful and powerful engagement.
Jazakallah khan. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. And with that, we've come to the end of today's edition of News and Views. Thank you so much for staying with us for the last 2 hours and 12 minutes. I'll be back with you again next week, Tuesday. Coming up tomorrow is the Juma edition of News and Views with Inayat Wadi. And you can keep it logged to Salam Media. If you missed anything, head over to our website, www.salammedia.com, or our various social media platforms to catch up on some of the interviews that you might have missed. Or you can head over to our Spotify channel, just search at Salam Media, and you'll get the podcasts of some of the shows that you want to catch up, you might have missed, or you want to listen on the go. It's been another incredible show. I'll be back with you again next week, as I mentioned. But we're going to see you for now. From myself, Salah, and the rest of the News and Views team, it's bye for now. Shap shap.